This isn't just a story. It's a journey, one that'll stay with you long after the video ends. So if you've ever felt love, loss, betrayal, or hope, then stay with us. Because this story deserves to be heard from the very first second to the very last. If this video moves you, even for a moment, please give it a like. Leave a comment telling us which part hit you the hardest, and share it with someone who needs to feel something real today. And if you love stories that are raw, emotional, and unforgettable, then subscribe to the channel, because we don't just tell stories here. We bring them to life.
It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The dress was ready. The flowers had arrived. Her mother had flown in from 2 states away. But just 7 days before the wedding, Emily's entire world collapsed. A message. One message. That's all it took. It was from her best friend, or who she thought was her best friend. I never meant for this to happen, but I love him too. Emily, 27, dropped the phone and stared at the wall. Silence. Numbness. Then the screaming started. Her fiancé, the man who promised her forever, had been cheating with her best friend for months. While Emily planned the wedding, they planned her heartbreak. She didn't scream at them. She didn't beg. She didn't fight. She just packed a single suitcase, walked out of her old apartment, and left everything behind. Her job, her friends, her memories. A week later, she arrived in a new city with no plan and no heart left to give. He found a small apartment on the east side, the kind that smelled like paint and mold. He didn't care. She just needed to disappear. The bookstore job came by accident. She was wandering downtown, staring into shop windows like they were movie scenes she no longer belonged in. The help wanted sign in the dusty window caught her eye. By the next morning, she was officially a part-time assistant at Marlowe's Books. That's where she first saw him. The dark eyes. Cold stare. His face looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He walked in like the world owed him nothing, grabbed a novel from the romance section and tossed it on the counter. Emily looked up and smiled politely. Nice choice. He didn't respond. Just dropped the money on the counter and walked out. She watched him go. Rude. But something about him stuck with her. Over the next few days he came back. Always around closing time. Always alone. Never spoke more than 5 words. One night it was raining hard. Emily was locking up when she saw him sitting outside under the bookstore awning, just staring into the distance. She hesitated, then asked, "You okay?" Jason didn't look at her. "You don't need to pretend." She blinked. "Pretend what?" "That you care." Those 4 words hit deeper than she expected. She wasn't pretending. But maybe she understood now. This man wasn't rude. He was broken. Just like her. Later that night she searched him online. A simple name tag on a receipt led her to a news article from 2 years ago. Tragic miscarriage ends young couple's marriage. Local architect Jason Carter files for divorce. Emily's breath caught in her throat. His wife had blamed him after they lost their baby. The media twisted the story. She accused him of being distant, emotionally unavailable, and even blamed his workaholic habits for the stress. The headlines crucified him. Overnight, Jason Carter went from one of the city's rising architects to a ghost. Now he lived in the shadows. And walked into her bookstore like a man trying to outrun his past. Emily didn't tell him she knew. Instead, the next time he came in, she handed him a different book. Not romance. Something about healing. He paused, looked at her, and for the first time, nodded. That night, as she closed the shop and walked home under a gray sky, she whispered to herself, "He's not the only one trying to start over." But little did she know, the man she was quietly watching would one day put the broken pieces of her soul back together. Jason didn't come in for the next 3 days. Emily tried not to care. She shelved books, made coffee for customers, smiled at kids who ran through the aisles. But her eyes always drifted to the door at 5:30 p.m. The time he usually walked in. And when the clock struck 6 and he still hadn't appeared, she'd sigh, tell herself she was being ridiculous, and turn off the lights. But on the 4th day the bell rang. And there he was. soaked from the rain. Hair dripping. Same serious face. He walked straight to the counter, dropped off the healing book she'd given him and whispered, "Thank you." That was it. Just 2 words. But for someone like Jason, it was a crack in the armor. Emily gave a soft smile. "You're welcome." Then he did something unexpected. He stayed. He didn't buy another book. Didn't browse. He just sat in the corner chair, reading quietly. Every evening. For a whole week. No small talk. No flirting. Just presence. And somehow that silence felt safer than any conversation Emily had had in years. One Friday evening the bookstore was empty. Emily sat behind the counter, flipping through a poetry book she'd found on the clearance shelf. She read a line out loud without thinking. "We bleed quietly, until someone teaches us how to scream again." Her voice cracked at the end. She didn't realize Jason had heard. When she looked up he was watching her. Not cold. Not distant. Just watching. "You okay?" he asked. Emily forced a laugh. "Just a poem." Jason tilted his head. "Sometimes poems say what we're too scared to." She nodded. "Sometimes they say what we're too broken to admit." Silence. Then he stood up and walked out, not like he was avoiding her but like he needed to run from something rising inside him. Emily watched him go. And for the first time she didn't feel alone in her pain. Later that night her past came back to haunt her. She was walking home when a familiar voice shouted her name from across the street. It was Ryan, her ex-fiancé. Drunk. Furking. Holding a bottle like a microphone. "You just gonna keep running, Em?" he slurred. "We were supposed to get married, remember?" She froze. He walked closer. "You can't erase history, babe. Especially not mine." Emily felt her chest tighten. Her palms trembled. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But she didn't have to. A sleek black car pulled up suddenly. The door swung open. "Get in," he said firmly. Emily didn't hesitate. As the car sped away, Ryan's voice faded into the rain. She sat in the passenger seat, shivering. Not from the cold. From the memories. Jason didn't ask questions. Didn't press. He just turned up the heat and kept driving. After a few minutes she whispered, "I hate that he still gets to me." Jason glanced at her. "People like that, they only win if we keep bleeding." She turned to look at him. His jaw was clenched. Eyes fixed on the road. Like he'd fought this war himself. And lost once before. He dropped her off at her apartment. But before she stepped out she turned back. "Why did you stop tonight?" she asked softly. He paused. Then said, "Because I know what it's like, to want to disappear and still hope someone sees you." And with that he drove away. Emily stood there, rain falling around her, heart pounding louder than ever. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was someone who saw the parts of her that even she tried to ignore. After that night something changed. Jason no longer walked into the bookstore like a ghost. He still said little, still avoided eye contact with most people. But with Emily there was a shift. He asked how her day was. He remembered the poems she liked. He brought her coffee one morning and awkwardly said, "Didn't know how you like it, so I guessed." It was wrong. Way too much sugar. But Emily smiled and drank every drop. Because it wasn't about the coffee. It was about the gesture. They started walking together after her shifts. Sometimes they'd end up at the same diner. Sometimes they just walked in silence, their footsteps echoing down quiet streets. One night they stopped at the bridge overlooking the river. Jason leaned against the railing. "I used to come here with her. My wife." Emily didn't speak. She waited. She hated water. Said it made her anxious. But she came here for me. Pretended to like it. That was her thing. Pretending. Emily turned to him slowly. "You loved her." Jason nodded. "More than anything." She hesitated. "Do you still?" He stared at the water for a long moment. "I don't know. I think I loved the idea of who I thought she was." Emily whispered, "Yeah. I know what that feels like." Their eyes met, and it was the first time neither of them looked away. Over the next few days, laughter slipped into their conversations. Not much. Just enough to notice. Jason brought her a book she'd mentioned once in passing, said he found it at a flea market. Emily made him banana bread and left it in his car when he wasn't looking. These weren't grand romantic gestures. They were quiet, real moments. Moments that mattered. One evening as they sat on the bookstore steps watching the sunset, Emily looked at him and said, "I'm scared." Jason glanced at her. "Of what?" "Of this," she admitted. "Of feeling something again. What if we mess each other up even more?" Jason leaned forward. "Then we take it slow. And if we fall together." That was the first time she felt her heart soften in months. He touched her hand just lightly, but it sent a current through her veins. That night, in the dim glow of streetlights, they kissed. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect. It was trembling and hesitant and full of unspoken emotion. And then Jason pulled back. "I'm sorry," he said, standing up abruptly. Emily blinked. "What's wrong?" "I thought I was ready," he muttered. "But I'm not. I'm still broken." She stood up slowly. "We both are." "No," he said, backing away. "You're healing. I'm still stuck." And just like that he walked off, leaving her standing alone. Emily didn't go to work the next day. She didn't text him. Didn't call. She needed space. But space turned into silence. Silence turned into pain. When she finally returned to the bookstore 3 days later, her manager handed her an envelope. No name. Just a bookstore receipt inside, with a note scribbled on the back. "Don't give up on me. I'm trying. Jay." Her heart squeezed. But when she tried calling, his number went straight to voicemail. The next morning she made a decision. She couldn't wait for someone who didn't know how to stay. She handed in her resignation, packed her bag and bought a train ticket back to her old hometown. She had no idea what she'd do there, but at least it wouldn't hurt like this. She stood on the platform, wind brushing against her face, staring at the tracks. And just before the train pulled in, "Emily." She turned. Breathless. Soaked in sweat. Panic in his eyes. "You can't leave," he said. She swallowed hard. "You made it pretty clear you didn't want this." "I was scared," he said. "Still am. But you're the only thing that's made me feel alive in years. I don't want to lose that." He stepped closer. "I don't want to lose you." Jason didn't wait for her to answer. He stepped forward, grabbed her suitcase gently and said, "Come with me. Just for one day. If you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you." Emily stared at him, breath catching in her throat. Something in his eyes told her. This wasn't about saving her. This was about saving them. She nodded. They left the station together. Two broken people, still unsure, still fragile, but walking side by side. He didn't take her to dinner. He didn't take her to some romantic rooftop. He took her to a quiet hill outside the city, overlooking a field of wildflowers. In the center was a small white bench. "This was where we planned to raise our daughter," Jason said, voice raw. "Before the miscarriage. Before the fighting. Before it all fell apart." Emily sat down, heart heavy. Jason reached into his jacket and pulled out a tiny folded letter. "I wrote this the day she left," he whispered. "But I never sent it." He handed it to Emily. She read it slowly. "I failed you. I failed our child. I failed myself. But I promise, one day I'll be someone worthy of being loved again." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You already are," she said softly. Jason looked at her, surprised. She continued, "You're not your past. You're not your scars. You're a man who shows up, even when it's hard." He sat beside her, quiet for a long moment. Then, without warning, he pulled out a small book, the kind people use for journaling. On the front, "Us." He flipped through it. Page after page filled with little memories. Receipts from the diner. Notes from book covers. Quotes she had once said. Her favorite poem, scribbled on the inside flap. Emily gasped. "You kept all this?" Jason nodded. "Every time I thought I'd never feel again, you reminded me I could." He turned to the last page. And there, written in his uneven handwriting, "Let's write the next chapters together." Emily didn't say anything. She just leaned forward and kissed him. This time he didn't pull away. This time he held on, like she was the last thing tethering him to the world. Weeks passed. The city no longer felt cold. The bookstore felt like home again. They spent Sundays baking, Saturdays reading, and weekday evenings walking under golden streetlights, laughing at things that once made them cry. But just when everything seemed perfect, a shadow from the past returned. Jason's ex-wife. She showed up at the bookstore. Elegant. Cold as ice. "I made a mistake," she said to Jason. "I want to fix things." Emily stood frozen behind the counter. Jason looked from his ex-wife to the woman who healed him, then said something that made Emily's knees go weak. "No." His voice didn't shake. "You left me when I was at my lowest. She found me there and stayed. That's the difference." The ex-wife turned and left. No drama. No tears. Just silence. And in that silence, Emily felt whole again. Later that night, as they sat on their balcony watching the stars, Jason took her hand. "I don't have a ring," he said. "I don't even know what forever looks like anymore." Emily looked at him. "But I know I want to spend every today with you." He placed the little journal, Us, in her lap. "I don't want a fairy tale," he said. "I just want a real story. Ours." She smiled, eyes filled with tears. "You already gave me everything I ever wanted," she whispered. "A place to belong." Puzzle piece final ending line. "We weren't each other's first love, but we were the last ones we'd ever need."